Hello and welcome to Q&A. Tonight, 2023 has laid bare fractures in our society, from the Voice referendum to bitter political divisions and a growing gap between rich and poor. For our final show of the year, we'll tackle some of these issues and ask, can we come together again? Joining our panel, journalist and broadcaster Chung Lei, who's back home in Melbourne after 3 years detention in China. Singer-songwriter Anthony Kalia. His new memoir, Behind the Voice, is out now. Kalari man Todd Fernando, the outgoing Victorian Commissioner for LGBTIQ+ communities. Executive Director of Hilmer's Network, Charlotte Mortlock. A political staffer and Liberal Party member. And TV and podcast host Osher Ginsberg, a best-selling author and advocate for mental health and climate change. Also tonight, is it time to change our national anthem? I want to pay my respects to the Wiradjuri people of the Kulin Nation on whose land we are meeting. Remember, you can live stream us around the country on iView and all the socials. Quandra is the hashtag, please get involved. To get us started tonight, here's a question from Simon Wong.
The Voice referendum, the climate debate and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict have highlighted deep and emotive divisions in Australian society. So my question to the panellists is, do you think the media has a role to play in bringing balance into these debates? Or should they be free to come down on one side of the debate or the other, given that opposing views are going to be articulated by different parts of the media anyway?
Lei.
I haven't been in media for over 3 years, not my choice, but it's been great to catch up since becoming freed. And in fact, the day that my sentence ended happened to be the day that the conflict between Israel and Hamas started. So it was quite a rude awakening. And I was at a news awards recently where one of the presenters said, who doesn't love kicking the government? And that brought a laugh and cheers from the audience, mostly journos. And I thought how wonderful it is to be back in a country where you can say that and you can feel that, you know, keeping them honest is not just a journalist's mission, but also the responsibility of every citizen. And when it comes to the role of the media, I guess for the past 3 years, I have really experienced a very restricted and, I guess, one-sided media, because that was all we could watch in the cells. So to come back to Australia, where it is pretty much, yes, there are fractures. You have people who go to certain media who, you know, have views that echo their own, and that division does seem to be widening. But putting it in perspective, we are still a lot better. I mean, every country has its own dysfunctional aspects, and that includes media as well.
It's incredible context you provide about a free media. Osher, the question that Simon raises, though, about the role of the media, and essentially, if I can kind of paraphrase you, you're saying objectivity and impartiality rather than cheerleading for a particular side.
I think if there's anything we've seen in the last year, Simon, is that our relationship as a nation, our relationship with objective truth is crumbling. And if we are constantly swiping in our phone looking for a new relationship, as people do sometimes, but for a truth that doesn't make us feel icky sometimes, then we're in trouble, because we can leave ourselves open to manipulation, to anxiety, to dehumanising others. And we all know those things are terrible. Sometimes truth is something that you don't want to hear. And being with that, being with the icky feeling, is a part of having an objective truth that we can both agree on. Like, there's two things that are real: your humanity, my humanity, and reality. And if we can agree on those things, then we can debate anything. But if you deny my reality and I deny your reality, then we're stuffed. And I think the media absolutely has to have a job to do that.
Look, I think, certainly Australia plays a very strong role in commanding a position globally in terms of how it is that we're presented. But I think it needs to play a strong role in the facts of what it is that is happening here in Australia or elsewhere in the world. And I think there's an expectation from readers, from consumers, about this idea that what I'm reading or consuming has to have some semblance in evidence or truth or fact of reality. Osh, I think you're spot on in terms of that analysis. But the question for me is, who decides that? What functions, what regulators exist to ensure that what's being printed in the paper or being told on Q&A is correct? And that's a very scary idea and a scary prospect, I think.
Okay, so far everyone has told the truth so far, but if we're going to play this game, ready to fact check you, Charlotte?
I think there's two really important things in this discussion about journalism and kind of the future of it. And the first is that social media algorithms are completely dictating what we're seeing. And I think that has put us in these massive silos. And even to the point of the news that we receive, we're actually not getting a whole picture. So I think that divide is incredibly corrosive for our society. But on the point of journalism, I think part of the problem is that journalists aren't paid enough. And I think that what this lends itself to is journalists, instead of being, unbiased and completely neutral, if you're a journalist, one of the ways you get more money is by having an opinion and by becoming a commentator. And that incentive to journalists, I think, really encourages them to be more outspoken on things, as opposed to being, that fourth estate that we so much need, particularly at the moment.
What an interesting observation.
I totally agree with that.
But it's true. You're absolutely right.
Yay! Great start.
It's true. You look at the way that people sign off, or people are interviewing, if they're out in the field. What's the ascension? We make fun of this when I do my fake news show. The joke is that anyone out in the field always wants to be behind the desk, and so then they look for that one grab that's going to get. But do you think this is a bureaucracy gone mad? And then there comes a soundbite, and then some news boss goes, "Hey, you did really well out there. You reckon I want to do Sunday breakfast?"
And this is because that attracts clicks.
Yeah.
And which brings back to the saying, we get the government we deserve, we get the media we deserve. So I think we, as media consumers, should be more discerning as well.
And a lot of the outlets media outlets are commercial entities, which I think that we do have to keep in the back of our mind, because it is hard to find the truth. I expect the truth from media outlets
without paying a lot for it.
But for me, I just go, we've also got a responsibility to be truthful with what we put out there from a media perspective.
But there's also a lot of different avenues. I mean, you and I are friends of Joy 94.9, Australia's only LGBTQ+.
Dropping
I just came from
gay station in Melbourne.
It's a community radio station that does incredible work at telling a different story that we don't hear in mainstream, that we often don't see written in the papers, and that serves particularly our communities very well. And that side of community telling a story is something that we don't often see.
Diversity.
Next, we'll hear from Tom Saxton.
G'day. I'm a student studying international politics, and considering the rising tensions in the Asia-Pacific and an emerging contest of power between the US and China, coupled with Australia's conflicting relationships with each nation, what advice would you offer to Australia on how to navigate this potentially dangerous future?
Wow, advice. And this from someone who's been sitting in a cell for 3 years. But of course, all that time, very much wanting to know what was going on between Australia and China. And it doesn't have to be a all or nothing proposition. You know, I'm all for nuanced reporting. I'm also for more nuanced statecraft. Because having been born in China, been brought up with China stories, whether it's the Great Leap, the Great Famine of 1960, the Cultural Revolution, and also reading a lot of Chinese history while in incarceration, you get a feeling of where China's coming from. It's super tetchy because it has to govern 1.4 billion people. It feels it's under attack both from within and without. It wants to go back and reclaim that top dog spot that it lost probably after the Tang dynasty over 1,000 years ago. And to do that, it needs to feel powerful, and that's where the defence side comes in. It needs to feel benevolent. So if you play nice, you know, if you kowtow, you'll get sweeties. And by feeling respected and influential, and hence its overseas media push and its diplomacy muscle. So
how do you think Australia's going navigating this relationship? There has been a thawing of the relationship, a stabilisation. Is that the right approach?
Well, you look at the relationship and it's like somebody with hypertension or diabetes. You know, you don't look at one reading and go, whoa, that's bad, or oh, that's really good, as I keep telling Mum. You need to monitor it at all times and see what the general direction, the trend is. And of course, in the media, we're all, you know, knee-jerk reaction every day, 24/7. But if you look at the bigger picture, if you look at the long term, it is still a stable relationship. And, you know, there are complementarities, whether it's rare earth or infrastructure or, you know, other investments. So, and in trade, it'd be good to see a thawing in trade relations. And I really don't think that, you know, taking everything that China says or does at face value, or any government does.
So what do you make then of the criticism of the Prime Minister, which we've seen from the opposition, that he should have raised with President Xi this issue of the Sonar Navy incident and that it should have happened directly? Now, the government says it happened at the highest levels. Do you think that that was a missed opportunity, or do you think it's more delicate than that?
I think it's more delicate. I think when you are two estranged, whether an estranged couple or friends meeting after a long freezing in the relationship, you try to ease your way back in and you try to regain trust, mutual trust. And China is possibly one of the most face-conscious nations on earth. It really needs that for the domestic audience. So it's not quite as easy as, oh, why don't you just go ask him that and, you know, never mind the consequences.
This gets us to the topic of our online poll. We're asking you, would you feel comfortable travelling to China given the current climate? You can cast your votes anonymously on the Q&A Facebook and YouTube accounts, on the ABC News X and Instagram accounts, and we'll bring you the results a little bit later. Now, let's go to a question from Chloe McCormick.
Hi, Charlotte. With all the great work the Hilmers Network does to support women in politics, what do you have to say to the Liberal Senate results in Victoria and New South Wales that we saw over the weekend?
Thanks so much for your question, Chloe. I really
So let's just clarify for those who don't know watching at home. So the results are basically the pre-selection of two men, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, in Victoria and New South Wales, and they will make an incredible contribution to our Senate. Mr Hoppert, I do not know personally in Victoria, but I'm sure he will be fantastic. Dave Sharma, I do know personally, and there is no one who will tell you he doesn't have an exceptional mind, particularly in foreign affairs, and his background will be extremely helpful for us in the Senate. But to your point, which is the lack of women being pre-selected, It would be disingenuous for me to say that I wasn't disappointed, that I really would have liked to have seen a female candidate get up. I went to the New South Wales Senate pre-selection yesterday. Gosh, it feels like a long time ago.
It was just yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I paused there because it feels like a long time ago. But it was awesome. We had 4 women in the field of 9 and they did an amazing job. And I just wish that the public got to see the women that the Liberal Party has in the pipeline because they are so impressive. And I just think that there is so much more that, you know, we have to offer that people aren't seeing. And one of the kind of big things that we saw in the Human Loughnane review, which was the review done into the last year's federal election loss, was that in seats where there were so Liberal voters typically that defected to the Teals, a portion that was surveyed said that they strongly agreed with the sentence that they voted pretty much against the Liberal Party because they didn't think that women were treated properly within the party. And women are not going to support an institution that they don't think is treating women properly. And I do think that in the past year, it might not feel like it to the public, but I'm in the beast and we are making a lot of improvements and culturally I can feel it. And the members are ready to support women and they are rallying behind women. And yeah, I wish that we got one over the line. It was upsetting in New South Wales. The 3 top spots were men who had been in Parliament before. So I would have liked to have seen the membership rally behind women. And that's not to say the men aren't impressive.
But why aren't they? Why aren't they rallying around women?
Well, I think in this particular one, I think it feels uncertain at the moment, just in the current climate. And I think people wanted someone that they knew. And I think that made it very hard to have a fresh face come through and win that because they wanted a bit more control.
Chloe, what's your story? Why are you so passionate about this?
Yeah, well, I'm a grade 11 public high school student and, you know, recently especially it's become pretty clear to me that one side of the political sphere is pushing a bit of an agenda within schools and, you know, when this started happening I thought, OK, I'm going to evaluate all the parties, see what they have to discuss, to offer, and it became pretty clear to me pretty quickly that my values aligned with the Liberal Party, and that was because of 2 main reasons. The first one, the Liberal Party's dedication to equal opportunity for a diverse Australia. My mum, she's an immigrant. I've witnessed her immigrant story, and this is definitely true and really important to me. And equally so, Liberals, you know, belief that the family environment is most effective to allow us to reach our full potential.
So the conservative values of the Liberal Party,
yes.
You're a young woman, does it worry you that you don't see more women?
Well, I think the Liberal Party values at its core want to support women. And I think we can see, we're not discussing here, the core values are supporting the family unit. We want to see economic opportunity for everyone, we want equal opportunity, as I said before. And so I think it's a matter of, we've got in the pipeline, as Charlotte said, a lot of great women. It's about giving them that opportunity and the time is coming.
Todd, I want to bring you in on the time is coming. And that term about the pipeline, that's been told to not only women but diverse people for a long time, right?
Oh, I mean, Aboriginal people have been waiting to get in line, I think, in Parliament for a very, very long time. Queer and gender diverse people also. I think the way that you talk about it is really interesting because what I hear is that there's a cultural safety issue amongst Liberals. And for me, I couldn't imagine having to be in the belly of the beast like you talk about and not see people who you admire and so passionately talk about get up. Like that would absolutely...
Well, we have just had a number of lower house pre-selections and we have actually selected, I think, only women so far. So that's awesome. That is progress, guys. We're heading in the right direction. That one's, for me, the upper house ones are like, I live and breathe them because that is us internally. As soon as they win a pre-selection there in Parliament, the lower house, we then have to go and win a seat.
Yeah. Anthony, is that something you notice in terms like gender, cultural diversity in political leadership?
I would just like to acknowledge someone like Chloe. I think wherever you stand politically, we need more people like Chloe that is engaged in politics and has an understanding of politics because that's the only way that we can move forward and engage. And I feel as though we just have to listen and be open. And I admire you. I'm just sitting here going, I wish I was like you when I was in year 11. I just think that that's really important, that we have people that are engaged. And you know, you get off on politics, clearly.
I do.
But in general...
I'm trying to...
Yeah.
trying to broaden my horizons here.
Not many people get off on politics, and it's really hard to stay engaged. Did I use the wrong words?
Let's be honest, people in Canberra, they get off. Let's be honest. Could I just quickly, just on top of that, we use the D word. Diversity is not just an old ship. Diversity is a very, very important thing to have, and I think for a lot of people, and I'm sure your colleagues at the Liberal Party are really great, but so often I see diversity is a box being ticked, all right? But the real problem that you miss, it is. But the real problem you miss, and I know this to myself doing this comedy show that I'm doing, like our writers' room, I have 5 people in the writers' room, there's one other straight white bloke. All right? Because there's only jokes that I see from the lens that I got born into. I don't see the jokes that I don't see. So I've got, like, the other jokes I get are amazing because I see the world from a completely different way. And if you're missing out on those ideas, if you're missing out on, idea diversity, real kind of thinking diversity is the thing you really, really need. Because your competition, whoever they be, political, commercial, whatever, are way ahead of the game if you're only allowing the angle from one side of the room.
I'm getting last Q&A for 2023 vibes in the audience. Everyone's very pumped tonight. Next, I'd like to bring in Pierre Lai.
Thanks, PK. My question is to Anthony. You rose to fame in Australian Idol before the era of TikTok. And nowadays, major and aspiring artists alike are all clamoring for followers and attention. So my question is, do you think this phenomena has changed the music industry for the better or for worse, and why?
Okay, so TikTok to me is a platform, and a platform is something that potentially will change in a year or 2 years' time. When I look back at it, I did Idol nearly 20 years ago, so that was my platform. We didn't have social media. And just to clarify, I'm not on TikTok. I think I'm a little bit too old for TikTok. But for me, that was my platform. That was my TikTok. And it's what you do with a platform. And social media doesn't necessarily need to be a negative thing. It's how you can use it and use it to, you know, I suppose share what you do. And, you know, I'm on the Instagram, I'm on the Facebook, or as my nonna calls it, the Fachabuka. And I, of course I use those platforms, but for me, Idol was my platform, but the work, once you've got a platform, you need to go with it and you need to work really hard. And that's just the beginning. And, you know, for me, the industry has totally changed, but you have to be really smart about it and understand what are the changes and how you can adapt to it. And, you know, people go, oh, how do you get into the industry? And, you know, I want a record deal. You don't need a record deal. Like, you need to start at the foundation of what music means to you and to me and start there and be truthful with it. And then hopefully that finds an audience and then use those social media platforms to share that. But yeah, you don't need a record label or that traditional way of what people see the music industry is.
Are you on TikTok?
I'll just say quickly that I found it really helpful during the lockdowns. So it's been a great creative outlet for a lot of us, but I'm a frustrated singer myself. But I think also being mindful that not to be addicted to people's likes and clicks, because a bit like what you said, Anthony, it's not the be-all and end-all.
No.
No, I was just going to say, I think the first question about journalism, we were talking about the divides in society, and I'm not trying to make a seemingly fun question more philosophical than it needs to be, but I do think one of the other things is it's awesome that TikTok has kind of removed some of the gatekeepers so we get more musicians.
Absolutely.
However, there's so many famous people now. Like, there's everyone
So
almost...
you're saying there's too many famous people?
Well, yes, I am, because then we share less in common. Like, if you know when you used to have a couple of singers that people knew or a couple of TV shows, and that's why the Matildas, I think, were so good, like when all of that happened, because we're all watching the same show and we shared that as a country. And I think it's really funny because now who I think is famous on my Instagram or who you think is famous on yours, it's like everyone's kind of got their own different little ecosystem.
I understand what you mean about a time of cultural scarcity. And look, there's to be honest with you, like that used to be my favourite TV show, the one that's on your T-shirt right now. And it was on this network 12 hours a day. And it sounded like in Brisbane. It was brilliant. But at that time, you were right. With cultural scarcity, then we have a similar reference point. And as I was saying earlier today, then you at least have a touchstone of reality that the two of you can relate to. And it's not to say that musicians aren't able to cut through. Like, people who have taken this and run with it, I think Taylor Swift would have to be the model, to the point where I'm just going to re-record an album that I've already released and more people are going to buy it than the first time.
And people are going to act like it's new.
Brilliant. Like, she's absolutely, as Anthony was saying, she's owning the situation. And so if they've got a really great story to tell and they can really connect with the audience, there's still going to be what you're looking for.
So, Todd, I know lots of First Nations people have really used TikTok and social media to get messages out that they never would have been able to get out like 20 years ago. So has it democratised things?
Oh, well, professionally, I'm not on TikTok, but I do have a...
You dabble in TikTok.
I dabble. I think I'm what they call a watcher. But it's an incredible community that has emerged, right? Like, there are some incredible First Nations talent that are on TikTok who are sharing stories about country and culture, who... cook with Keen's curry. Like, I mean, it's a broad brush. But I think, you know, Osh, you talked about this idea of Taylor Swift. For me, it's Lil Nas X. His entire media strategy on building a song, building brand awareness, getting it on TikTok, getting it TikTok famous. TikTok famous made him millions of dollars. So it's got to be working. So jump on.
I'm too old. For me, music is all about live. Like, I'm really fortunate, nearly 20 years down the track, still doing what I absolutely love to do. Do I somewhat rely on social media? Yeah, to a certain degree. But to me, I always bring it back to the core of what I do, and that's live music and live performance. And when you take your audience along with you, whether that's on social media, whether that's in the live environment, I think that's really important to keep that connection with your audience.
ChatGPT can't do that.
Sorry?
ChatGPT can't do that.
That's actually right. Are you on TikTok?
No, I'm not.
Are you going to get on TikTok?
No.
Are your kids on TikTok?
Yes, they are. Of course.
Of course they are. If you're just joining us, you're watching Q&A live with Chung Lei, Anthony Kalia, Todd Fernando, Charlotte Mortlock and Osher Ginsberg. Plenty to get to tonight. Now here's Rebecca Wood.
Todd, what do you think we can do to move past the referendum result? And is it possible for a treaty?
Thank you for your question. To get to your answer, I need to contextualise it in where we are now in Australia, particularly after a no vote. And to do that, I want to walk you through what it was like for me. So before I left my house, I live in the seat of Melbourne. I was wearing an always was, always will be Aboriginal jumper on. I think we've all seen them. And I looked in the mirror and I took it off. And I didn't want to be identifiable in the line. It was the first time I ever voted in Australia where I was like, I just want to disappear. I don't want anybody to know who or what I am. And I got home feeling a bit down from that experience. And then a friend texted me later that evening saying, I'm sorry. So I didn't have the TV on, I didn't have the radio on, and that was how I found out. I felt numbness for the very first time in my life. I walked around my apartment shell-shocked for about 3 or 4 hours. I couldn't form a word, I couldn't form a sentence, I couldn't understand what had just happened. And over the next 4 days, I remained in that apartment. I didn't want to leave the door. Like, I didn't want to go outside. I live in an area where, you know, I'm identifiable. And I just didn't want to have a bar of it. And I wasn't alone in that experience. Many of my friends and family who are Aboriginal went through that very same experience, that we felt utterly rejected. We felt the shame of that rejection. And when the shame set in, maybe day 3 or 4, that we dared to ask Australia a very, very modest ask, it was very overwhelming. That shame, I think, has really been felt right across many Aboriginal communities, right across Australia. And we went into then a week of silence And that week really was to mourn decades of hard work, to mourn leaders like Marcia and Noel and others who had put their heart, soul and entire life on the line for this. And I had to watch Marcia on the TV the next day get up and pretend like it didn't happen. And that was gut-wrenching to see. And what we're seeing now, particularly, when what we're hearing are these stories of, I was recently talking with a grandmother and she told me about the story of her vote. And what she did was she took her grandkids they went to their grandkids' school, public school, to vote. And then she talked to me about this idea that 2 days later she had to send that kid back to that public school, where for that kid perhaps is now a site of cultural violence, public schools or voting centres, and now this kid has to go there and realise that this is the place where Australia voted no. That might be just one isolated case, but I suspect that it might not be. And what we're seeing and I think what we're feeling is that utter rejection has caused political apathy. What I mean by that is this idea that that people aren't feeling valued or have worth in society. So we've got a lot of work to do to fix that before we do anything else. Now, treaty is going to take a very, very long time. Treaties, I should say, will take a very, very long time. But we do have, right across Australia, governments who are in the conversation about treaties, who are progressing treaties in a really, really good way. But it's going to take a while. And often what I say to people, particularly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, is yes, talk to our communities and our leaders about what it is that we want out of a treaty. But for non-Indigenous people, what do you want out of a treaty? I can't tell you that. Like, if you don't know, as we found out on October 14th, Australians told the truth for the first time, they don't know, then what do you want to know? What is it that we can show you? Why it is that we desperately needed a voice? Because clearly the campaign didn't show you enough of that. And just on the campaign, if I could, there was a moment where Australians, voters, started asking for details, and we had the audacity to be like, racist. The irony here is that we lost an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice to Parliament because we failed to listen to the voter. And that's got to sit on not just Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, those who voted yes or those who voted no, all of us. I think we missed a genuine opportunity to walk together. And that's very sad. Got to move on. Got to move on.
A really powerful answer, Todd, honestly. Leigh, I know you were obviously incarcerated for a lot of the time leading up to this, but you did come out as we, found out how Australia voted. What are your reflections on that?
I was brought back to vote.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So did you get to vote?
Yes.
Wow.
And in fact, coming back, because I sort of lived in China most of the time for the past 20 years, and when I came back, I discovered that I felt it was more inclusive, more interracial relationships. People were more mindful. My kids are super aware about racism, about sexism, about LGBTQ, and about Indigenous people. So, to me, I'm obviously not as despairing as Todd, and I just think we stop whinging and start fixing. You think, like Charlotte is with Hilma's network.
So you think work can be done still in this area? Not all is lost?
I totally believe it.
Wow.
Oh, look, firstly, Todd, thank you so much for sharing. Your story is amazing. And as heartbreaking as it was to hear it, I know you've just spoken. People can't be what they can't see. And if they haven't seen another person feel that way, and you emoted very well. And look, it doesn't matter what I voted, it doesn't matter how any of it, when I saw that we'd gone from mostly wanting to do it to, oh my God, the UN's coming to take my backyard, I don't care how you voted, I have no quarrel with you, but if you're not terrified of how quickly we were manipulated as a country, if you don't want to start asking questions about who flooded the zone, we're really lucky. We're really lucky that it wasn't during a car key election, you know what I mean? We're really, really, really lucky. But to move forward, coming here tonight, I was like, who do I call? I called going to drop a name, call Professor Megan Davis, like, what are you doing? And she says, she says, I have hope. She told me, so I have hope. She goes, for the first time, we actually have evidence. 6 million Australians want to vote, want to walk forward to a future for a better path for all of us. 6 million's a lot of people. We saw what 100 people did in Newcastle the other day. 6 million's a lot that they cannot be ignored at the next federal election.
Yep, that's 4 out of 10 people are educated on this issue. That's how I see it. So if 60% voted no, we've got 4 out of 10 who are there. Fact check it if you want. But
6 million's a lot of people.
But 6 million's a lot.
It's also not a majority, though, right? And so there are lots of different reasons why people voted no. Some people just didn't like the model. Some people probably did have racist views. How do you see it, Charlotte?
Oh, look, I think it's been such a divisive year for so many different reasons. And it also feels like these divisive moments are happening more frequently. And I do absolutely think that there is work that we can do in a constructive way that is going to really unite the country, and that's what we all have to focus on now.
But that was the chance.
Do you truly believe that? Do you truly believe the leader of the... You really believe that Dutton wants to unite us?
And Jacinta Price wants to unite us?
With all of your heart, hand on heart.
I do. I think the question is really the how. Of like the
Yeah, no. I just care about the why. Why do you believe he wants to? Because if you tell me the why, I'll believe you. But I don't believe he really wants to.
No, I absolutely believe that both Peter Dutton and Jacinta Price do want a united Australia. It's just the different machinations and the different methods of getting there.
Yeah, but this was the model that, like, I mean,
you didn't answer me why.
Communities across Australia, Aboriginal communities across Australia, for 2 decades, 3 decades, have been talking about this, and like, what more did we need to show Australia around what it is that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples wanted? Like the division that I think was set forth by the No campaign was very clearly an architect of the division.
Yes.
Like that's what I just thought. Like I mean, I get your point. Like I really do. But at the same time,
I mean, in New South Wales, our Liberal leader, Mark Speakman, he voted yes, as did a lot
Many Liberals did.
Yeah,
but like,
so I'm just saying, like, we are a broad church. There were plenty of Liberals that voted yes and plenty of Liberals that voted no.
But I mean, you had Jacinta Price,
So
whose
they're
own community voted yes. Let's start there. Like, most remote Aboriginal communities voted yes on this, despite Jacinta Price and Warren Mundine coming out saying, oh no, remote communities don't want this, it's too divisive. And it's like, the evidence is very clear that that was the one community who probably, out of, I think most of us on the panel are doing well, are fine, but the one community who actually needed government support Anthony, and actually needed a voice.
I'd love to bring you in here because if there's someone who gets across this country a lot, it's you.
See,
Did you know that it was going to be a no?
I didn't want it to be a no. And first and foremost, I just want to say I'm really sorry that you went through that. Like, that's...
But how many times are we going to say sorry? Kevin did it in 07. Let's move, like,
I'm
let's...
talking about from me to you.
Thanks,
but I just think taking politics out of it for 2 seconds, it comes down to just listening to people's stories. That's how you learn. And for me, I'm a big believer that Indigenous studies, for example, should be compulsory in schools. Sometimes I feel so ignorant because I just wish that that was compulsory at least until year 9 or year 10.
Because it wasn't, I'm assuming, when you were at school.
No, we just did history in general. But I'm like, I want to know the history that has built this, that is of this country. And I feel as though that I don't want to be ignorant. I want to know more. And I feel as though if we can bring a new generation up having more understanding and conversations about the truth of our country, then I think that's the way that we should move forward, and that's the only way that you can make change.
I agree.
Now I'd like to bring in Birgit Trower.
Well, actually, my question is mainly targeting Otter, if I may say so. Your interest is obviously very well known in mental health, and you're also very well known as a host for Bachelorette. Now, how do they belong together? I've just come across an article where they were reporting about the recent development and integration of mental health and asking the male participants to share their mental health issues on screen as part of Bachelorette, talking to their partners publicly. And it's been very well received in America. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in Australia. My questions will be, do you think that will have the same resonance here in Australia if that was going to be integrated, mental health issues, where male participants talk about their mental issues publicly? Secondly, to another question, to what extent do you believe Australian men will seek professional mental health therapy after seeing The Bachelorette?
Are you referring to Golden Bachelor? Is that what you're talking about?
Pardon?
Are you referring to the Golden Bachelor?
Yes, it's...
Oh, right. So the one, because we do a few versions. There's lots of ladies, one boy, and this is the one boy, lots of ladies. Okay, right. So he's an older gentleman. And look, I don't own the format. I'm not in format development. I don't work for the network. I just count the flowers. But don't worry, it's for lots of money. Not as much as it used to be. Look, I think one of the great privileges of working on a television show like that is that you get to be able to almost Trojan horse some things into popular culture and certainly primetime television that you otherwise wouldn't have. For example, one of the greatest seasons we made was with Brooke Blurton a couple of years back. It was amazing when Dr. Amy Thunig came on and in 13 words asked, if I asked you what country that you grew up on, would you be able to tell me? And like that changed the conversation in our nation around understanding what country we live on. And you can't be what you can't see. And I think it's important to model things. Like, if there's one thing that's terrible about having kids, it's not that they don't sleep or shout at you all the time. It's they don't do what you tell them, they do what you show them. So you kind of have to really be on your game. And to be able to model for other men, this is what a conversation could look like. This is what you being, proudly understanding what's going on with you. And that's not to say that I'm moaning about my problem. It's not that at all. It's just taking responsibility for your situation. And being able to model that in a way, I think, is a very, very important thing. And if that's the way that we get those concepts into society, then great. If there's roses in a big cymbal crash, then hooray. As long as it helps more men get help. Because we know that a man who's dealing with mental ill health is not only a great danger to himself, he's a great danger to people around him. It's true, though. And so we need to help. We need to normalise that and understand that, men like to be helpful. They like to do stuff. And if you don't have the right tool to fix the noisy toy that someone gave your kid, you'll go down to the hardware shop and get a new tool. Aha, I fixed it. So this should be the same with your head, just taking responsibility for what's going on and managing it. My tool shed is my psychiatrist called Adam. He's a lovely man, very handsome, smarter than me, younger than me, terrible. Handsome, lovely. But if I'm not able to deal with things, he and I have a chat and then he helps me work things out. And that's really important. It allows me to keep doing my job. And it's important.
And if this discussion is raising any difficult issues for you or anyone you know, you can contact Lifeline on 13 11 14 or Kids Helpline on 1800 55 1800. Both of those numbers are there on your screen. Now let's next hear from Nick Coxon.
Hello, my question's for the queer panel members and others with intersectional experiences. You've been on a journey to get to where you are, and you're now a source of strength for many. To steal a question from RuPaul, what advice would you give to your former self?
Love that you've quoted RuPaul, just saying. Anthony.
Back yourself, believe in yourself, and when I was younger, I really wish that I told myself to pluck my eyebrows earlier, so I didn't have a monobrow. But and love yourself. I think I went through such a journey myself, and, I feel as though even as a 40-year-old who's about to turn 41, I'm still going through that journey. And when I look back at my 19, 20-year-old self, I know for me, as someone that was trying to find myself, it was so traumatizing. And I honestly thought that, I went to a very, very dark place, and I was extremely ashamed of myself. And I thought that it was going to destroy my entire family. I'm like the eldest child. I'm the eldest out of 16 first grandchildren, come from a very Catholic background. I didn't have that I suppose, that visual support around me at the time, and I do love it now that there's there's so much more visual support for the LGBTQI+ community. And I feel as though that should be encouraged, and, you know, we have beautiful people like Todd who we can look to and is a beautiful leader and is compassionate, and I wish I were more like you.
So, Todd, what would you say to your younger self?
Run to therapy very, very quickly. Don't daddle, run as fast as you can. But also read a book called Velvet Rage. It'll change your life earlier than, you know, much needed earlier. But also have a little bit more fun, relax a little bit, because, you know, you've sacrificed so much to get to where you are, and that's the point that I think many people don't see in our types of journeys, is we've put so much on the line and sacrificed so much to have the success that we've even had. And for me, that's certainly been my experience. But yeah, therapy and read as many queer novels as you can.
Nick, I'd love to turn that question back on you. Your question to yourself, what would you say to young Nick?
Oh, thanks. So I grew up as a queer kid on a farm in rural Victoria. I was interested in musical theatre and theatre in general. So I guess I'd say don't change your interests or who you are to try and fit in.
Did you try and do that?
By the end, I found a good community. Initially, I was pretty afraid, really. And I had some good supporters around me, which I clung to, and then things got better. So thank you very much for your advice.
That's right.
And your question was beautifully framed. You said, and the intersectional people on the panel. So,
what about you, PK? What do you tell your younger self?
I'm not giving any advice to my younger self. Where is that person? But Leigh is here, and I do want to hear from you because you know, you're a real trailblazer in your own community. You've gone through an incredible ordeal. I wonder what you would say to little Leigh.
Well, this is something that I hope my kids aren't paying attention to, because I would advise my younger self, especially as a Chinese Australian younger self, parental approval is overrated.
I love that you said that in front of your children and your mother.
He's sitting right there.
Yeah. They're just pretending to clap. Do what you love and the rest will just fall into place.
And that's such a theme, though, isn't it?
Yes.
The seeking of that approval.
I was an accountant.
What happens
for 6 years.
when you abandon that? What happens in terms of your own personal growth?
Oh, hugely liberating. Yeah. And I took a 90% pay cut to start in journalism, TV, and no experience, and it was wild. And even though it did lead to some unpleasant conditions, but I've survived, and I'm really happy to be back on live TV.
Yeah. We're very happy to have you back. Oscar?
What advice would I give to my former self?
Yeah, why not?
Well, I'll be 50 in March, so
Woo.
I don't know how, but I'm nearly 14 years sober, so I would say, dude, stop drinking a lot earlier. You know what I'd say? I would say this to my 14-year-old Queensland self. It's like, yeah, I know the ad says that if you open a beer, Alan Border and the Queensland cricket team will appear out from behind a palm tree, take you on a fishing trip, and there's chicks in bikinis. And that beer might make you, the first beer you drink might make you think, oh, I feel just almost like I'm almost a little bit okay with being in myself. I might just have one more. I would say to him, buddy, it doesn't matter how many more you have, you'll never get there. But I gave it 22 years of trying, and it nearly killed me. But yeah, I'd say that. And what else would I say? Oh yeah, go to therapy. And remember, you're better when you're around other people. I thought for a long time I would deal with difficulty by trying to isolate myself. And all that happens is it just gets worse and worse and worse. Oh, I feel worse, I'll not go anywhere. And then I just don't leave my house for 5 days. It didn't work out well. So I would say, yes, just don't drink so much, buddy. In fact, don't drink at all. It's not good for you. And yeah, you're better with other people.
Charlotte, quick one from you.
Well, keeping with the theme, I'll also give a plug to therapy.
I've never seen Q&A so therapy focused. I promise no one's secretly sponsoring us.
But yeah, I think probably to my younger self to be a bit wilder. I think I was a bit risk averse in my 20s, and I think I could have been a little bit wilder. And I am also a very big advocate for surrounding yourself with people that think differently to you, that have different experiences to yourself, that disagree with you and you challenge. So I think lean into that curiosity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And we can bring you the result of our online poll now. We asked you, would you feel comfortable travelling to China given the current climate? More than 8,000 of you responded. Here's how you voted. 35% said yes. 55% said no, and 10% are unsure. And Leigh, I'd love to get your reflections on that. Wow, that's quite a result. Would you feel comfortable suggesting to people to go to China?
Would people believe me if I said they should?
You're very funny.
Well,
let's just say they would believe you. What would you say to people who obviously were not in your particular role, who might want to go, or send their children on exchange, or...
China is a very big country. The China of now, I think, is different to, say, the China I went to in 2000 and then, you know, the subsequent decade. I think you have to figure out what to be mindful of. I mean, right now, I'm super wary of anything purporting to be protecting national interests, national security, I should say. It's just such a blanket term, and I don't want naive people going there. If you're going there fully educated about the risks, and yeah, it's a complex question. It's a huge country. I have very mixed feelings about it. I mean, you know, what makes a nation? There are so many things.
Are you ever going to go back?
Never say never. But right now, I'm not allowed to go back. I'm not allowed to apply for a visa until 10 years are up.
Well...
And if people want to improve their Mandarin, they could go to Taiwan.
And to finish tonight's discussion, here's Tsunami.
So to give some background, I'm from the homophobic war zone that is Queensland, and I'm a male who wears dresses and get gang bashed in the street for it. In terms of my question, we were talking about The Voice before. I can't help you until I stop pledging allegiance to the Commonwealth, so I think we do have to come up with a republic before we can have that voice. If we compare the lyrics of Advance Australia Fair with I Am Australian, one mentions First Nations, the Anzacs, the first settlers, bushrangers, the stockmen that keep the beef on our tables. The other is only from the perspective of the first settlers alone. How can we help the Indigenous people when we need to change the vote? We need to change the national anthem to I Am Australian so it reflects all Australians, not just the first settlers that came here. It has to respect every single culture that is in our country. We need an anthem that we can be proud of.
Okay, so quick whip around the panel. Do you want to change the anthem?
Well, firstly, I also grew up in Queensland.
I've been to Queensland and have delightful times.
Yeah. Well, I would say, look, it's a dirgy thing, and I don't know how many times you've had to stand in the middle of a football stadium and sing it, Anthony, but there's no... Look, there's show in show business. At least put a key change. Put a pyro cue in there. Let me know when to let off the fireworks. Come on.
Charlotte?
Is Anthony singing it? Because will make it sound a lot better. I think it's a hard song to sing.
He might be throwing us a tune soon. I'm not sure if it's that, but yeah, I think we should change the anthem.
Look, I think that we keep the anthem, but we can add more stuff into it. I think that.
Oh, really? Those who've come across the scenes, Boundless Places Share. We never sing that verse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first verse in that song is about the first
Todd?
Truth be told, I just stand during most anthem singings and I don't really sing. It's not that that's my version of taking a knee, essentially. I respectfully stand and let others sing it. But I'm keen to see what Anthony comes up with in terms of writing a new song.
Are we tasking him now with writing a new anthem?
That ain't happening. I think, for me, an anthem is meant to unify people. And yes, It's a tricky one. I think the anthem needs to be reworked. We've already slightly tweaked it in the last couple years, but it was only, I think in 1977, that's when there was a plebiscite for the actual anthem, and we've only had that national anthem since 1984. We can make changes to it. I feel as though we all know the tune. It is anthemic. That's what an anthem is meant to do, but we can advance it, and let's be fair, it's in the title.
That's great. And Leigh, final word to you.
Well, songs can mean so much in incarceration. I still remember teaching my cellmates Amazing Grace, and this song just would bring everyone to tears, whether they knew English or not. And if enough people feel that the words, I mean, the music, I think, still moves everyone, but if the words of the anthem don't reflect what they feel about being Australian, then I think, sure, change it.
What about My Island?
That's Christine Anu's song is amazing. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you to our fantastic panel, Shang Lei, Anthony Kalia, Todd Fernando, Charlotte Mortlock and Osher Ginsberg. We're in for a treat tonight because Anthony is going to sing us out. That might be your cue, Anthony. And thanks to you for sharing your stories and questions. They are so important to shaping our conversations here on Q&A. This is our final Q&A for the year in what has been a momentous time for Australia and also around the world. We'll be back from 2024 on Monday, February the 19th at 9:35 p.m. Put it in your phones now, put it in your diary.